Hey guys, we got a big time matchup in the Big Ten and the SEC, of course. Welcome back to Up to the Second College Football, Episode 9. We do it for the Saturdays, and this show is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, and they want to remind you to have fun out there with Academy Sports and Outdoors. All right, so on the show, we've got Braden Gall on it. He says that there are 3 legit college football playoff teams. He's got a 4th in there, but maybe because of default. We'll talk a little Ole Miss, Auburn. We'll also talk Michigan, Michigan State, Florida, and Georgia. Ohio State taking on Penn State. That's right, guys. It's going to be a loaded Up to the Second college football brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. All right, it's time for our big guest of the week, Braden Gall. You can hear on ESPN and also 440 Sports in Nashville, joining the show here to break down all the big storylines in college football. Braden, how are you, sir?
Oh, doing well. Any chance I get to talk about college football in the state of Texas, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, man. So let's start off in the SEC if we can. Ole Miss, Auburn, that is a huge matchup. The ripple effects afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it starts, frankly, with Ole Miss and Texas A&M in a couple of weeks, right? Because I think both these teams, Ole Miss and A&M, and I know that they're playing Auburn, I get that, but just bear with me here. But those two, when you look at their schedules, outside of the game against each other, in theory, could run the table and could be sitting at 10 or 10 wins in A&M's case, maybe 11 even in Ole Miss's case. And that's top 6, top 7, top 8 type of good at the end of the year. And so what's at stake in 2 weeks is pretty huge. So both teams, Ole Miss has to handle its business this week. All the distractions with the Brian Harsin nonsense and all that stuff is certainly not going to help Auburn. Bo Nix is playing his best football of his career by far, so clearly Harsin is doing good work with them. There's just something special about Matt Corral right now. Like, his numbers aren't gaudy, and it's one of the lowest totals he's had under Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. I checked it, actually. I don't think Ole Miss had run the ball pre-Lane Kiffin 50 times in a game since they played A&M in 2015. And I'm sure A&M fans remember that game. But they're running the ball 50-plus times a game more than once this year. So some of that's Corral. So I think he needs to get more buzz, I think, nationally for what he's accomplishing. It's going to come down to which quarterback makes the fewest mistakes. And right now, Matt Corral's the guy. So it's a fantastic football game. I wish the Harsin stuff wasn't happening and wasn't going on, but it's going to be a fantastic football game. And it sets up what could be a top 10 matchup next week with A&M, which is just, I mean, talk about defensive line versus quarterback. I mean, that's just going to be an awesome game next week if they can get by Auburn this weekend.
All right, so let's talk about Auburn for a moment, or really big picture with Alabama obviously still on their schedule. Is Alabama vulnerable here? Do they have a game the rest of the way? Is it Auburn where they could lose their second SEC game?
I guess it's possible. Certainly, I get what you're going for there with A&M trying to get to that 2 losses to win the division and have the tiebreaker. I think it's possible, but what made A&M uniquely qualified to win that game is also what sort of made Florida uniquely qualified to compete with Alabama earlier in the year, which was they were at home. They had a hostile, crazy environment, 2 really good defensive lines that were physically capable of standing up to that Alabama rushing attack, which frankly is, I don't want to say one of the worst Alabama rushing attacks we've seen, but it's not up to regular Alabama standards. So it sort of takes this unique confluence of events to beat Alabama. A&M had all of that. Florida had almost all of it. I think Georgia clearly has the defensive line to stack up, stop them, make them one-dimensional. And then Pete Golding and Alabama on defense haven't accomplished what they need to accomplish. So does Auburn have some of those pieces, with the defense and some of those weapons? And if Bo Nix plays a great game, Auburn may have some of those pieces. I think vulnerable is the right word. Would I bet against Alabama? Not, again, Bama fans are like, what the hell was that crap again on Saturday night? And they covered a 3+ touchdown spread with, 28 points in the fourth quarter, and they won with ease. So it's sort of like you have to grade on an Alabama curve sometimes when you're talking about Alabama.
Braden, we were talking A&M a moment ago. Just your thoughts on how Jimbo has navigated through the injuries, through the inexperience, where it looked bleak for a moment, and now they're back in the mix to potentially do something nice this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think running the table after those 2 losses is certainly that's certainly possible. It's very much possible. Now, the offensive line is probably going to dictate that because it feels like he's brought Zach Calzada along to the point where now he feels comfortable in the offense. They're opening up the playbook a little bit more. All the weaponry around him is always been there. But you can see the growth from, all right, he goes in against Colorado on the road. We've got maybe 6 plays we can run. Like we didn't have many more plays in the book ready for the backup, right? Like that takes time. Well, then the Arkansas game happens, and you're kind of going, well, wait a second. Why did we physically get pushed around as much as we did? Why didn't we have some growth from the quarterback position? And it's almost like it just took a couple of weeks, right? Like the Mississippi State game is just this giant question mark that fans may always just go, what if, for the rest of the season or whatever. Because, again, it could, to your point, it could cost you a division championship, the Mississippi State game. But you clearly see the growth of the quarterback play, the comfort in the offense. The playbook is very complicated. Do I wish he would sort of speed it up a bit and maybe increase some of the tempo? I think that's probably a modernization thing that he's going to have to do, but that's more offseason stuff. The defensive line was always there. I had DeVarman Leal winning Defensive Player of the Year in the SEC at the beginning of the season. I think he's a top 5 pick. I think maybe Kayvon Thibodeau is better than him along the defensive line in the entire country. So some of the things they've done is not really that surprising. And I don't know, how many games are they going to be an underdog in the rest of the way? Like, again, I mean, the Ole Miss game is huge, but I don't think they're, I running the table is very much possible. And again, that would put you 10-2 with a chance at a pretty high level bowl game and probably another top 6 or 7 finish in the country heading, with momentum heading into the offseason. I think there's a lot to like there. I just, college football, you're all gonna go, what in God's name did Will Rogers do to us? That's just going to end up probably being the thing. Now, if you lose to Ole Miss, 9-3, still a really nice season, but not what you expected in the preseason. So I think there is, the fans' appreciation for this team and how they handle the offseason might almost exclusively be dictated by that Ole Miss game, which is kind of weird, but it might be true.
Let's move to the Big Ten, Michigan versus Michigan State, 2 teams that I guess we're really going to find out about this weekend. Your thoughts heading into this one?
Yeah, I think you're right there. It's about what we're going to learn. Michigan State's been far more explosive on offense, more balanced than Michigan. Haven't really been truly tested. I know they beat a Miami team. Michigan's played a little bit better schedule as far as the defenses go that they've played. So it's always great when these two get together. Even better, undefeated top 10, just Ohio State looming for both of them. Like it's awesome. It's everything there is to love about college football. I know Michigan State's been far more explosive in the big plays. Kenneth Walker has been more explosive on the ground. The quarterback and the receiving core has been more explosive. I don't trust Cade McNamara, the quarterback at Michigan, just yet. This will be the game to figure out, is this guy capable of competing with the best offenses in America, a la Ohio State? So I think Michigan's the better team. I think they're the more complete team. I just need to see the quarterback do it before I can sort of definitively say, all right, I think they're better than Cincinnati, or they're better than, Ohio State, or better than some of these teams we've got ranked in the top 5 or 6. I think that's why there's a hesitancy with Michigan is, can they find that dynamic passing attack that frankly they've been missing for almost all of Jim Harbaugh's tenure up there. So I like Michigan. I think they're the better team, but I'm with you, man. I got my feet kicked up, the brown water's poured, and I'm just ready to go with that game for sure.
All right, Braden, last thing for you, Oklahoma. I think I saw on Twitter this week you had them in your top 4. They've not that hard of a schedule the rest of the way. Are they top 4 because they find ways to win games, or because you do believe in them?
Can I give you a C answer?
Yeah.
Who else do you put in there?
Right.
Honestly, like I think Georgia 1, Bama 2, Ohio State 3, and I feel really comfortable about that. Like I know Cincinnati fans are angry about that, but if you want to talk about schedule, if you want to talk about being tested, if you want to talk about depth, if you want to talk about all this other stuff, winning a close game to Navy, a 1-6 team, is not any different than what Oklahoma just did to Kansas. And I know they scored late and it made the score look different, but who are you picking on a neutral field right now, Cincinnati or Oklahoma? And I would take Oklahoma. So that's why I have them at 4, Cincinnati at 5. But after that, name me a team that you feel like right now today you can make a case belongs in the top 4. They're undefeated. Their offense is still one of the best in the country. They've made the switch at quarterback, which has unlocked the Lincoln Riley offense to some degree. Defensively, they've had some stumbles here lately. They've got a couple of nice wins. They've got a couple of big games on the schedule still. And like all these teams, they're going to have to prove it to us. Like Cincinnati's not going to be able to prove anything because they don't play anybody the rest of the way. But all these teams, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan State, Iowa even, like they all have to still prove it to us. I think the only three that I don't think I need to see any more from are the top three, Bama, Georgia, and Ohio State. That's why I've got Oklahoma at 4. They're undefeated. The offense has evolved and changed. They've beaten the teams they've played. They've won every game, found ways to win. I right now it's because I think 4 through 30 is about the same. Like if you told me Texas A&M was the 4th best team in America, I probably wouldn't argue with you. Like Kentucky, are they number 4 or 5? Like
sure.
Michigan State, Wake Forest, like Pittsburgh, Baylor, who belongs there? They all have a case, and so I think outside of the top 3 or 4, I'm not sure how you can definitively make a statement about any one team.
Braden, we appreciate it, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Need a new grill? Academy Sports and Outdoors is the destination for your outdoor cooking needs. With our free in-store assembly and pre-assembled grills and smokers, buy online at academy.com and pick up in-store. So keep those grilling plans at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, guys, we got a huge showdown in the SEC as well. You got number 10 Ole Miss on the road taking on number 18 Auburn. Should be a great game. Jason Caldwell from autiger.com joining the program to give us an Auburn perspective. And let's just talk a little bit about how Auburn has maneuvered their way to this point of the season. Are they better than we've seen, or are they about what we expect?
You know, when you have a new coaching staff come in, really new systems on both sides of the ball, it's kind of been a work in progress all season long. I thought, defensively they gave up some yards against Arkansas, but most people have so far. But thought they played their best football a couple of weeks ago, with a win in Fayetteville. Now they've had a bye week to kind of heal up, get some guys healthy heading into this Ole Miss game. But yeah, I think they're coming along. Haven't run the ball quite as well as maybe we expected or most people expected with Tank Bigsby back and with the emergence of a guy like Jarquez Hunter. But I think overall, they're a team that has continued to take some strides, and that's the goal for them now. They're not explosive on either side of the ball, but they played pretty well. And we'll see if they have their best football ahead of them. That's always the goal.
Jason, let's talk a little bit about where you are right now, too, thinking about what's ahead, right? You've got A&M the week after. At the end of the season, you've got Alabama. So this is a huge stretch to determine what kind of year you guys have.
Absolutely. You start looking at this league, and, Auburn has already had, road trips to LSU and Arkansas, which they play well, and already played Georgia at home, at Penn State. So they've already had some challenges, but you're right. You get Ole Miss at home this week. At Texas A&M, you got Mississippi State still, who's shown they're capable of playing, and being a challenging team. And then obviously Alabama there at the end. So, this is a big, I don't want to say swing game, but this is one of those, if you win, you got a chance to really build a little bit of momentum. Obviously, momentum's only as good as the next game in this league. But yeah, this is a big one because, sitting there at 5-2, you got a chance to improve a little bit, get another big win, potentially a top 10, win there over Ole Miss, and give yourself even more momentum.
All right, we're going to add to the conversation with an Ole Miss perspective. Neal McCready joining us from rebelgrove.com. Neal, thanks for joining us as well.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. So we talked about how big of a game it can be for really both programs. Just from an Ole Miss perspective, we talked about Auburn has to still play A&M, and they've got Alabama. Ole Miss obviously has got A&M the week after that game they have against Auburn.
Yeah, so it's Ole Miss has been in this stretch of games. It started with Alabama, and then it included, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, now Auburn. And then they get a break next week with Liberty. There'll be all the Hugh Freeze crap that everyone will do, and they'll drag it around, and everyone will talk about it. National media people will mistell that story in two completely different ways, and we can do that another day. But from a football standpoint, that's a break. Then they get A&M in Oxford. Then they get a break because you get the one bye week that you get in the SEC when you play Vanderbilt, and then they go to Mississippi State. So it's a really hard spot on the schedule. This has always been a spot on the schedule that I thought this is going to be a problem, and I still think this is going to be a problem. But in a scenario where you told me that Ole Miss beat Auburn on Saturday somehow, some way, they kind of get a week to recover, and then the A&M game would be just massive. And then if they could somehow survive that, then you get Vanderbilt, and then you get the Mississippi State game. So, if they beat Auburn somehow, and for the record, I don't think they will, but if they do, they wake up on Sunday morning going into the month of November absolutely in the playoff picture. No question about it. There's no way that you would be able to have that conversation and not include them. At 7-1 with the one loss being at Alabama, they'd be in the hunt at that point.
So let's keep it right there, Neal, for a second. And in a world where you have the Oklahoma issues with quarterback and Bryce Young looking phenomenal, Matt Corral came in with a lot of hype. He's lived up to that. Has he been better than you expected, though?
No, not really. I've always been sort of Team Corral. I probably made a lot of enemies here 2 years ago when everybody was doing the John Rice Plumlee thing. And this is not about John Rice Plumlee, the person, who's a really neat kid and does everything that you would want out of a student athlete and all that stuff. But I never once watched John Rice Plumlee operate that offense and thought, oh, yeah, this will beat the good teams in the SEC. Never. It was one-dimensional. And if you could take that dimension away or just limit it, you could shut them down. And if you go back and remember in 2019, Ole Miss played some games against good teams where the good team smoked them. And then in the fourth quarter, Ole Miss would go on a run and Plumlee would get some stuff. And I think they played at Auburn, and Auburn was kind of fatigued at that point and sort of looking ahead. And Plumlee made that a competitive contest. But there was never a moment in that game where you thought, Auburn could lose this. It was always – no, as long as Auburn just doesn't wet the bed here, they're going to be fine. And it was sort of that way. And Corral has always, guys, had big-time arm strength. He's got an NFL arm. When you watch him throw, you see it. He can make every throw. He's a very bright kid. What he's done better this year is he's made better decisions. And he's been consistent with protecting the football. He's got one interception, I think 15, maybe 16 touchdowns. He's got a bunch of running touchdowns. He's been smart with when he runs the ball. Matt's made a lot of money this year.
Jason, what about Bo Nix playing some great ball the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, he's played much better. And I think, kind of to Neal's point, a lot of those things depend on the guys around you. I think, some of those guys have stepped up. Ole Miss, the ability to run the football is a big deal for them. It's taken a lot of the pressure off Matt Corral. Auburn hasn't run it as well as Ole Miss, but they've had some running game. He's been part of it. He was a big part of the running game against Arkansas, did some things obviously against LSU. But, I think for him, it's been adapting to a system that he's never played in. Most of these quarterbacks now come out and they're in shotgun only. It's RPO game. It's quick game. Heck, half the time they want him to throw the ball and they don't even grab the laces. Now he's in a system where they're under center some. It's a more of a traditional NFL system a little bit with Mike Bobo. But he's also been allowed to start reading defenses and do second and third reads for the first time in his career at Auburn. I mean, it was basically, hey, here's the ball, throw it to this guy. And now it's a matter of, hey, they have actually the ability to read defenses, and I think he's making really good decisions. It's all about protecting the quarterback and giving him time. He can make plays scrambling around and doing those things. But you saw last week, 2 weeks against Arkansas, when he's able to stand in the pocket, they give him time. The timing of the offense then is in rhythm a little bit. And that was the first time we've seen it in rhythm. That'll be the key for them against an Ole Miss defense that's much better rushing the passer than it has been in a long time.
Neal and Jason, this is for both of you. What must happen, what can't happen this upcoming weekend? We'll start off with Neal.
You mean for Ole Miss to win?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what must happen, on to Jason's point, is they have to be able to run the football. That is, we do this all the time. People are like, Lane Kiffin, it's a pass-happy offense. But no, it's not. It's really not. It's a run-oriented offense with that will kind of trick defensive backs into getting their eyes into the backfield, and then they'll slip somebody behind them. They're very good with route concepts. Jeff Lebby and Lane Kiffin's a really dynamic combination mentally with the offenses that they put together, but it's all predicated on being able to run. And to Jason's point, they've got guys that can run it. Ole Miss can't turn the ball over. It stands to, obviously. They've got to be able to run effectively. And then on defense, they've got to do what they've kind of done the last couple of weeks, and that's you can bend, but you can't break, and you got to cause a turnover or two. And I think Ole Miss has been careful with what they've said, but it's very clear that they know that Bo Nix is a very capable quarterback who's playing really well and who is in a system that I think he enjoys better than the last system, which was either, hey, here's the guy, throw it to him, or here's your one read, make a play, get the ball out of your hands. Now he's allowed to do some things, and he's liking it. And look, I think Arkansas is good. I've said this for a while, and I think Arkansas is a good football team. This is not the old Sam Pittman. I mean, the old Chad Morris deal. This is a hard-nosed, smart, disciplined football team. Ole Miss played them 52-51 or whatever it was, and then I was really impressed with what Auburn did in Fayetteville. Both of my daughters go to Arkansas. I knew how hard the ticket that was. I knew how up they were, how excited they were, how much work Sam has done to get people. And that place was packed at 11 a.m. And Auburn went in there and handled it. And it was a good game. And Bo Nix played really well. Otherwise, Auburn loses because you were walking into a place where it was going to be really hard to win that day. And, I think they can't let Bo Nix beat them with his feet. They've got to say, hey, look, if we're going to get beat by him, he's going to have to beat us with his arm. And Jason's right. They've gotten better at getting some pressure on the quarterback. They've got to pressure him. They've got to hope that they can force Bo Nix into a couple of mistakes. And if they do that, they've got a shot. But look, I covered Auburn for a long time, and that stadium at night when they're excited is special. And it's going to be a raucous environment. And Ole Miss has played in Tuscaloosa this year, and they played in Knoxville when it was, guys, a freaking circus. So, I mean, they've seen it. But they'll have their hands full Saturday.
Jason, give us your thoughts on what must happen for Auburn to win and what can't happen.
Yeah, Neal touched on one of them. There's an obvious one. It's always there. It's always turnovers is one of the things. You can't go out there and lay it on the ground a couple of times, throw a couple of interceptions. I think the big thing for Auburn is you got to get off the field on defense, and that's hard because you're going to have to defend 4 plays probably 5 or 6 times against Lane Kiffin. Get off the field and then stay on the field on offense, which means you got to run the football. Auburn's not going to be a grinded out, try to be 40 minutes time possession. But what you can't do is go out there and have a few 3-and-outs and look up. And Auburn defended 91 plays against Arkansas. That was the thing that you look at in that game and go, man, you can't do that a bunch in this league and win. Can't do that against Ole Miss and win. You can't defend 91 plays against them and expect to win. So I think you start there. Can Auburn have success running the football? Ole Miss coming off its best game of stopping the run of the season against LSU last week. Did they find something? Did LSU revert back? Who knows? I mean, this league's so crazy. College football is so crazy right now. You just don't know what to expect from one week to the next. But I think Auburn has probably gone into this week going, look, we know we got to be better at running the football, and it starts there. So I think that's the key. And then, again, it's kind of that old formula. Neal mentioned it. You can't let Ole Miss run for 260, 270 yards because when you do that, then that play action game, those deep shots that they want to take on offense are all there for the taking. You got to put them in second and third and long situations and then try to tee off a little bit and get after Matt Corral. That's the game plan. Can you execute it? We'll find out Saturday.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. We'll catch up with you again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
At Academy Sports and Outdoors, bikes for the whole family are just a click away. Buy online at academy.com with our free in-store assembly. Your next set of wheels, plus helmets, pads, and water bottles will be waiting for you at our in-store pickup counter. Get to the fun faster with our in-store pickup and free assembly at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, guys, so we start our big storylines in the Big Ten. You've got number 6 Michigan on the road at number 8 Michigan State, and we're joined by our good buddy Chris Balas of thewolverine.com to break it all down from a Michigan perspective. Hey, Chris, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me again, guys.
Hey, man, so Michigan obviously undefeated, playing really good football. I'm not sure how good they are yet. I guess that's what this weekend's for, but just how have they gotten here so far?
Yeah, good defense. They're number 2 in the nation in scoring defense after giving up big plays last year. They brought in Mike McDonald from the Baltimore Ravens as the defensive coordinator, and he's done a great job with that. So, but really the running game, they're averaging about 250 yards a game on the ground. Still need to prove that they can do it through the air with Cade McNamara. So, and this is going to be a week where we find out a lot about Michigan and Michigan State. Like you said, neither one of them have really played anybody. If we look at it, Michigan State's top win is probably at Miami. Miami's no good. And you look at Michigan at Wisconsin, solid win. Wisconsin has no offense, however, and then at Nebraska at night was pretty impressive, but neither one of those teams is ranked. So this is the weekend where we kind of separate and we find out which one of these is at least a little bit for real.
Chris, you mentioned that Cade McNamara and the offense, some are still worried about it. What are you seeing that isn't working?
Yeah, the deep passing game. And I wrote that after the game. I said, you know what? You're going to have to beat some of the better teams on the schedule with a vertical passing game. You look at Ohio State, even Penn State with their defense, even though they know they lost to Illinois, at Michigan State, you're going to have to be able to throw the ball a little bit. And that's something they haven't been able to do. Ronnie Bell, they lost their deep threat, their senior receiver. First game of the year, first half of the first game of the year, and that's been a struggle for them to find a guy. Cornelius Johnson has come out a little bit in that respect, but they don't have that go-to guy. And Cade McNamara has been dinking and dunking down the field. As you know, man, at some point you're going to have to be able to turn it loose if teams are going to stack the run against you, and I expect Michigan State to do that.
Now, you mentioned the running game. Let's get into it because that is a ferocious attack out there, constantly going over 200.
Yeah, Hassan Haskins, a beast. This is a guy that they actually moved to linebacker in year 2. They finally moved him back, and he's been unbelievable. Doesn't have the top end speed, but he's a chain mover. And then on the other side, you've got Blake Corum averaging 6.3 yards per carry, a second-year freshman who get him to the outside, and he's got that burst. So really been good. But the story there has really been the offensive line. Ed Warner was a technician, the coach from last year. He ended up at Florida Atlantic. They replaced him with Sharon Moore, and he's been fantastic. You can see these guys are hungry to play for him. They've been getting push up front, even against the Wisconsins and the Nebraskas, put up 200 yards rushing there. So they think they're going to go in there on Saturday and be able to move the ball that way against Michigan State as well.
Let's talk about this rivalry. What does it mean to this current crop of Michigan players?
Yeah, a lot more now. You know, it was 40 years where Michigan just dominated the rivalry. The last 10 or 15, Michigan State's kind of taken control. And even Jim Harbaugh is only 3-3 against the Spartans. They've been close games, though, and he's kind of taken that rivalry back to an extent. But you got to get over the hump. Michigan fans don't want to lose, 1 out of 3 even to Michigan State, let alone be 500. So these guys, a lot of in-state guys on the roster, obviously, and that is an ugly rivalry. Bobby Williams, Michigan State's former coach from the early 2000s, called it a bad rivalry, and that's the way I would characterize it. No love lost. These schools are 60 miles apart, and you can see it and feel it every time they play.
What scares you about Michigan State?
The balanced offense. Peyton Thorne's been outstanding. He might be the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. And then Kenneth Walker, that running back, has been outstanding. Is transferring from Wake Forest. Who would have seen that coming, right? So, but they really upgraded their team speed in the transfer portal. And that's an area they were picked last to finish last in the Big Ten East. And Mel Tucker's done an outstanding job plugging holes there. But that balance is something that Michigan has not seen yet. The play action, the deep threat, if they hit the big plays against Michigan, I think they win this game.
All right, Chris, last thing for you. What can't happen on the road?
Yeah, they can't let the ball over their heads. Michigan's cornerbacks last year had a terrible time against a horrible Michigan State team because the ball was sailing over their heads with the big plays. You do that with Jaden Naylor and some of these other guys and receivers, you're going to lose that game, and you can't give up the big running play either. So that's the big challenge for this Michigan defense. They've been solid. Do not let they're going to have their chances inside the 20s, but they can't let them score in the red zone. They can't give up the big plays.
Chris Balas, thewolverine.com. Thanks, sir.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right, guys, another storyline is Georgia's dominance, and can Florida get back on track? Those two teams meeting up this weekend. And with a Georgia point of view, we're joined by Dean Legge of DogPost.com. Dean, how are you, sir?
Good. How are y'all?
Great, man. So let's first off start off with the quarterback situation. I don't know if it really matters the way Georgia's defense has been playing, but what is the latest there at the quarterback spot?
Well, we were at practice on Monday, and it's looking more like JT Daniels will start against Florida, but that's based on a limited amount of information. We'll see what Kirby Smart has to say as the week goes on. JT, there's a reason why he was the starter coming into the season. They have a very dependable number 2 or 1A with Stetson Bennett. But I think there's a lot of folks that feel like JT Daniels gives him the ability to blow the roof off of the thing if he's in there. But he's never played in Jacksonville, and, it's a challenging environment.
How have they made it work? I mean, obviously, I know the defense is beyond elite, but from an offensive perspective with, the indecisions at quarterback, not knowing who's healthy, who can go, how have they made it work?
Well, and it's not just been the quarterback who's been banged up, but they've stuck with what they feel like they can do well, which is running the ball effectively with play action pass, or just getting in the shotgun and letting Stetson or whoever's in there throw it around a little bit. They're not super fancy, Georgia, but even their backup offensive guys or their number 2 offensive guys can be lethal. Ladd McConkey is a good example of that. Brock Bowers is a good example of that. These are guys that literally nobody, even someone that like me that follows the program very closely, that's not someone you were expecting to play or have big focus this season. But both of those guys have been good to elite, and that's how they've done it. Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator. He was the OC at Oklahoma State for a while. He has done an exceptional job at Georgia, and the guys have been wide open. The offensive line's played well, and the running backs are good. There's no superstars in the Georgia offense. They're just really solid everywhere.
Dean, even though Florida's not ranked this year, this still means a lot to Georgia, does it not?
Yeah. I mean, this is the biggest game of the season for Georgia, no matter what. Doesn't matter the year. Georgia has 3 rivals, Tech, the Gators, and Auburn. And, they have a lot of big games, but Florida is their biggest rival. It's the biggest game. It's the most unique game. And they lost last season. They got completely whipped. And I think that they have circled the Florida game as a game that, they want to win, and they probably want to win convincingly.
I know that Georgia is used to having some really elite recruiting classes, but with the way this season's going, how are things shaking out? Could this be the best?
Well, the 2018 class with Zamir White and Justin Fields and players like that, it might be tough to catch those guys. Looking at my board, that it's a really good class. I mean, they got to sign them, but I think what they've got right now is not where they're going to end. And I think that's the part that's so curious to watch is where will they end? They've got a very good quarterback, which is what you're going to have in every single class. But it's not just that. They're having DBs that are coming up. Kirby's doing there's never been an issue with recruiting. He's done an excellent job. He's an elite recruiter, no question. But I do not think they're done with this class yet. It's hard to evaluate it early. I know we're not as early as we used to be, but this is a really good class. We're just going to have to see where they end up.
Dean, last thing for you. I want to go back to Florida for a moment. Florida obviously having their issues this year, but beyond being a rivalry game, they were able to play Alabama very tough. So big-time games, maybe they can show up. What scares you about Florida, if anything?
Well, so people who are not as familiar with this rivalry might not understand the PTSD that Georgia still has from the 1990s. I mean, they got down there and were whipped every single season except one. And when I say whipped, I mean badly. So there's a lot of that's still around 30 years later. That's not based in reality right now, though. I mean, Georgia's the better team, the better program. They have a better player, better head coach. But I think the thing about it is that Dan Mullen is really good on game days, and he can call very good plays. Florida's defense is not as bad as people are making it out to be. They had a really bad day against LSU. They played well against Alabama, as you said, but they're not consistent. And I think to beat this Georgia team, you have to be consistent for 60 minutes. That's my issue if you're picking the Gators in this game. It's going to be tough for them to win this game because Georgia has been consistent for every game they play. People say you can throw out the records and you can't really in this rivalry. I mean, in the last 40 years, only twice have double-digit underdogs won this game. That was in 1997 when Georgia beat the Gators by 20, and in 2014 when the Gators beat the Dawgs by 20. So it's not common. The better team usually wins this game, and that's what I expect to happen on Saturday.
Appreciate you, Dean. Thanks so much, man.
All right, thanks.
All right, we're going to close out our big storyline. Still in the Big Ten, number 20, Penn State on the road taking on number 5, Ohio State. Got some defense taking on some offense. Our buddy from the Ohio State's point of view, Kevin Noon, joining the show, BuckeyesScoop.com. Kevin, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. So talk to us about this year, because I look at Ohio State kind of a little similar to A&M in the fact that you guys were one team in the beginning of the year and now a different team now. What has changed? How has it changed?
Well, I think that part of it is that C.J. Stroud is much more comfortable. He's not dealing with a shoulder injury, so he has more control over the offense. I think that the defense is starting to come around, but before anybody runs out and starts buying Ohio State national championship gear, let's remember that they played Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, a down Indiana team. So we're going to see a little bit more as the next 5 games come up. But I think confidence is a big thing for any sort of young team that is putting guys in positions that they've not seen a lot of playing time on the college level. And with CJ Stroud and some of these other guys getting more experience, I think this team's starting to come on and round into shape, and you want to be playing your best ball come November and beyond, and the Buckeyes are well on that trajectory.
So how did they get CJ Stroud back on track? And, obviously beyond the confidence, they must have done something to simplify it or just get him in plays that he likes.
Well, he had the Akron game off. He was dealing with a shoulder injury. Now, must have been one hellacious shoulder injury if he's been such a night and day type of situation. And let's not say that he was 6-24 for games prior to the Akron sit down for him. I mean, he was playing well, but he wasn't playing great. And now he's playing great. But when you have triplets the way that Ohio State does with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba, it certainly makes things a lot easier for a quarterback. And I think the emergence of Trevion Henderson in the running game has given him a reliable, explosive, freakish, if you will, type of running back, and it just making everything that much better. We already knew that he had a great offensive line in front of him, the Ohio State offensive line on that short list for the Joe Moore Award going to the top offensive line unit. I mean, he's just got a multitude of riches around him. And I think when the defense starts playing better as well, I mean, there's just another confidence level that goes there additionally.
Where can Penn State get Ohio State? Where can they really test them?
They might have to just lock them in the locker room, I think, is about their best chance. Penn State's got a very good pass defense. Penn State did take a big blow when it lost P.J. Mustipher off the defensive line. I mean, he's a tremendous player, but Castro Fields in the secondary, some of their secondary guys are going to be significantly better than what Ohio State has faced most of the way. I think Penn State's really going to have to try and sit there and keep Ohio State from picking them apart in the throw game. Penn State maybe been a little bit more susceptible to the run, which means this could be a big Trevion Henderson game. Ohio State expecting to get Master Teague back this week. But you just can't let Stroud go out there and pick you apart. That's really going to be the big thing. I think that they're going to have to get creative with their blitzing, keep the young quarterback guessing, keep the line on its heels, and not let Ohio State establish any sort of rhythm.
All right, Kevin, last thing for you. What's going to happen if Oregon runs the table, Ohio State runs the table? Well, how do you think that plays out, considering where the teams are now, but also their previous matchup?
Head-to-head has to mean something, but I think if you look at Ohio State, and that's not to say Ohio State over its next 5 plus potentially a conference championship game under this scenario 6 is going to go out and keep beating teams by 40, but Ohio State's wins have been much more impressive than Oregon's wins. Ohio State potentially could play 4 more ranked teams, whereas there's not a lot of meat out there in the Pac-12. So I know all your viewers are going to be shocked that the Big Ten guy is going to say, give it to Ohio State, but I'm going to say, give it to Ohio State. The head-to-head was so early in the season. Sometimes it's not a matter of who you lose to, but it's when you lose. That was a September game, a very different Ohio State team, kind of a very different Oregon team that no longer has CJ Verdell at running back, has been dealing with some injuries on its own. I think that the Buckeyes would end up getting the nod, but we're going to find out a lot come next week once those first college football playoff rankings drop.
Kevin, thank you so much, my friend.
Absolutely.
All right, that does it for Up to the Second College Football. Our thanks to Academy Sports and Outdoors. We will see you guys next week.